Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. I am your host, Shayna, and I am back with the promised episode of Cupid and Psyche. I missed all of you so much. Thank you again for all of those who have supported by sharing the content. I appreciate you. You are valued, you are loved. Thank you, Lipensky, for sharing the content on social media. Thank you for those who have donated. I appreciate it. I really hate to prompt people for donations because I believe that what I'm doing shouldn't necessarily be for profit. But in order to enhance the show's content, I appreciate all donations, whether it be through Cash App, whether it be hitting the like button, sharing, subscribing, and also following me on Instagram. I appreciate you guys. And my favorite of all, leaving a comment. Thank you so much for the comments, so much for being engaged, so much for being in the live chat. I'm overwhelmed with love and support, and I thank you for that. And ultimately, God thanks you because, like I said, I'm just a vessel. Amen. So let's dive into Cupid and Psyche. But before I do so formally, I want to get into a bit of backstory, but also, before all else, put up some disclaimers. Today's episode can be very triggering. So, those of you who are not necessarily in the best mental state right now, this episode may not be for you as it does pertain to ooicide and sexual suggestive topics and parts and things. So you may not, this may not be for you, and that's okay. That's all right. Now, I also just want to shout out Malaya. Thank you so much for commenting and just letting it be known that you'd like to know more about the English language being a bastard language. I am working on that bonus content for all of you track stars. So again, shout outs to her. And let's go ahead and dive into Cupid and Psyche. This one is loaded, and this episode will actually be broken into two parts because it is so lengthy and it's so deep, but I don't want to miss a thing. You feel me? Now, the earliest known version of the story Cupid and Psyche was actually written by a man named Lucius Apuleius, and he was a philosopher from northern Africa, and he studied in Athens and Carthage, which is in Greece. Now, you know me in names. For all of those who have watched my episodes on the nefarious breakdowns, you know me in names, all right? But the most ironic part of this story and the earliest author, I just happened to look up the name Lucius, right? The name Lucius actually means light. Now, in this story, of course, we have the two main characters, Cupid and Psyche. But very important to note, we also meet Apollo, which is the god of what? He is the god of light. He is the god of the sun, but also he's the god of knowledge. Now, how would that correlate necessarily to Lucius and a couple of other known characters that have been depicted and given many names throughout history, both written and unwritten. Well, I'm here to clear that up. Now, Lucius, meaning light, and Apollo, the god of light, in this story, Psyche, for the most part, when it comes to the thin line between love and infatuation, is for the most part being kept in the dark. But Apollo is the one who helps Cupid and Psyche come together to form a union. Interesting, right? But then you also have a particular person that was in the Bible, or an entity, I should say, that helped to disengage the union between men and women. And he was also named Light, or Lucifer. Hmm. And he helped create the enmity between man and woman. Isn't that crazy? Hmm. Okay. For those of you who are picking up what I'm putting down. Now, before I get carried away, our story that's Greco-Roman today, but we're going to give more so attention to the Roman side because, as I've mentioned, the English language and the Greco-Roman culture influence on the English language and just the culture altogether. It is important to note that names are going to be used interchangeably just for this brief explanation, but I'm going to be using the Roman names for today's story, today's half, I should say. So, Cupid is the Roman god of love, but like I've mentioned in a previous series for Narcissus, we spoke about Eros, which is the Greek god of infatuation. But did you know that Cupid, the Roman god of love, from the Greek god of infatuation, is the same person? It's the same character, different names, depending on which culture you're going with. But we already defined in the Greek the four different ways in which love is defined from the Bible, because you got to remember the majority of the Bible was actually written in Greek to what? Further relate to the people who needed to know about monotheistic ways, which was the Greek, because they were polytheistic, hence all the gods we're speaking on. See how crazy things get lost in translation? And sometimes we just need to sit down and research and pick apart. Okay? We need to stop quoting other people's YouTube channels and the History Channel and just do the research for yourself, because somewhere in the middle is the truth. I'm talking to somebody. But anyway, let's get into this. Because as much as we spoke about love, what I really want to get through to my track stars today, we got to talk about infatuation, right? So, what is infatuation? Well, you know me in the dictionary. I went ahead and looked it up for you. You're welcome. Infatuation, according to the dictionary, is an intense but short lived passion or admiration for someone or something. Now, I spoke about different types of love. There is unconditional, there's familial, there's uh, eroticism, and then there's brotherly love, friendly love, right? But when it comes to infatuation, it could be for someone or something, which means subconsciously you have to realize that when it comes to infatuation, you objectify something or someone. You may put them on a pedestal, but you may not actually understand fully the value of said thing. You're just obsessed with it. Crazy, right? So, Eros or Cupid, as far as the Greek, focuses on infatuation, but in Rome speaks of love. So, technically, the god of love for the Roman in today's story of Cupid and Psyche, please keep in the back of your head, was this guy in love with Psyche? Or if you want to get technical, Psyche represents the mind. Was he in love with this girl's mind and her way of living? Or was he just infatuated with her? Yeah, I paused on purpose. All right, let's get into this. I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited. All right. So today's story starts with Venus, who is the goddess of love, the Roman goddess of love. However, in the Greek, she is known as Aphrodite. Hmm. And the story starts with a princess that Venus is jealous of named Psyche, or the mind she represents. And now, Psyche, it's important to note that she is mortal. Venus is a goddess, okay? She's immortal. Psyche is a princess and she's mortal. However, Psyche is extremely beautiful. And as far as being on earth, she is somewhat worshipped as a goddess. And Venus, who's enraged with Psyche's beauty, she's PO'd. She's pissed off. She's tight. She's like, nah, not her being the it girl, but I'm the one who's immortal to be worshipped forever. Not on my watch. So Venus decides to be petty. Oh, she's a petty patty. Let me tell y'all about her, right? So Venus decides to be petty because she decides to use her baby boy Cupid. That's her son. That's her kin. And Cupid, as a way to inevitably destroy Psyche, partners up with his mother to avenge her so that his mom can be worshipped in temples and altars instead of people focusing so much on Psyche, right? So Psyche, innocently just minding her business, being beautiful and whatnot, she doesn't even like being all that beautiful, to be honest, because she realizes that as beautiful as she is outwardly, nobody really wants to get to know her for who she is. So let's look into that. So the story begins with the plot with Venus and Cupid trying to have a scheme basically to get the attention off of her and back to Venus because Venus can't survive without being worshipped. Psyche, a mortal, on Earth is going about her day to day business. She's trying to sneak past her annoying father, who's in constant pursuit of trying to have his beloved daughter married. Like most dads, you would say, they want to see their little baby girl get married. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But her father has relentlessly summoned her to have a conversation about potential suitors and how she's become of age, yada, yada, yada. And she tries for the most part to ignore him by going to her private quarters, to which he goes to look for her in her chambers and persists on having this dreadful conversation yet again. So the king, her father, is looking for her everywhere on one particular day, thinking she ran off outside the palace and was gazed upon by commoners. He actually finds Psyche lying in her bed pretending to be sick in efforts to kind of delay the conversation yet again. So the king catches on that she's faking that she's sick. And the king kind of calls her out and was like, listen, you lucky you cute, because you being an actress pretending you sick ain't working out for you. We gonna have this conversation, sis. Like, she tried it, right? So then he makes sure that he segues the conversation into letting Psyche know that there's been many letters from eligible bachelors in the kingdoms and whatever, but particularly there's a few that he narrowed down that sent portraits. Now, you gotta have money, okay? Imagine, imagine you're a prince, right? You got the baddest princess in the land, okay? You trying to get next to her. And the only way to enhance your chances of getting next to sis is if you sent her a portrait. But they ain't have no cameras to be taking no selfies to be sending it, okay? Homie had to sit still for mad hours, get a whole painting, and then send it through mail. He got money, okay? Talk to him nice. Anyway. So she goes through a few of them, of the ones that are priority mail shipping. And she complains of the first one's portrait. He's too young. The second, too old. And the third, he a little sus. I don't like the way he looks in his picture. So the king, he's grown a little tired of Psyche being so critical of all the men her father chooses. However, Psyche makes mention the only thing she really wants is for someone to understand her. It's not enough just to admire her beauty. She wants someone to love her unconditionally. Despite how beautiful she is physically, she wants someone to know her mind and for her to know her husband's mind because she's Psyche. So the king, completely missing Psyche's point, confirms he can't guarantee all her desired attributes for a suitor based on portraits, but he can assure her that once she's married, it's all going to work out, as it quote unquote should. So the king tells Psyche that she should trust that whoever she chooses will love her for her. Fair enough, dads. They're just like, whatever, you'll grow to love him, it's fine. Your mother probably grew to love me. I'm annoying, it's fine, is what he low-key wanted to say. So Psyche then replies, what if they don't? And what should happen when I grow to love my partner, but my beauty fades and I'm unhappy? So what's gonna happen then? So the king explains she shouldn't think of all those miserable thoughts and just enjoy what she has for now, which is her youth and her mind, right? And the king then explains the importance of Psyche's willingness to engage with the crowd from the balcony the next day and her engagement for her possible suitors. So, as promised, but reluctantly, Psyche meets her father at dusk and she accompanies him into the courtyard balcony to greet all of her subjects. And as she walks into the sunlight, we have thousands of people there to greet her and cheer and praise her. Now, Psyche, however, didn't really feel like the goddess people treated her as. Important to note, she's immortal, but people worship her because she's that beautiful. And although she was compared to Venus by most mortals, she felt like she was held captive. And unlike Venus, she felt she had no control over her own fate in regards to her freedom and who she chose to love and marry. Meanwhile, we have Venus, who calls her son Cupid to give him the rundown on Psyche. Now, Venus, god of beauty and desire, storms down Mount Olympus in a fit of rage, causing doves to fly every which way to her son Cupid's bedroom, only to find him having relations with a nymph. Awkwardly, yet sternly, Venus asks the nymph if she can have a moment with Cupid. Oh my god. I gotta pause. Cause what? what what type of relationship do you have that you just out here doing whatever, running amok in your mother's house? You are knocking boots. And your mom just walks in. Yet your mom, although she's annoyed, she doesn't tell sis to get out. She's just like, excuse me, can I borrow my son for a moment, please? Wet? Never in my mother's house. But when in Rome, I guess. Couldn't be my house. but, anywho, the nymph, embarrassed, gets up and then transforms herself into a shrub, while Cupid follows Venus, annoyed, asking, "What now, mother?" What? Who are you talking to? Okay, so Venus angrily explains to Cupid how the mortals are calling Psyche the new incarnation of Venus. Being that Psyche is mortal, she's upset for the comparison, being that she should be worshipped since she's the one who's the goddess. Now, Cupid cuts Venus's rant short by explaining she should wait until Psyche ages, being that mortal beauty fades. So just wait for her to get old. What's the problem? Now, Venus ain't trying to hear all that. Okay? She trying to get her lick back for all of the admiration she'd been lacking, but sis been getting. Okay? Impatient Venus interjects and demands that they do something now, being that her altars and temples to her are bare and abandoned. Venus explains that working with Cupid can solve her problem that very night. So Cupid shows his reluctance and asks to be left out of his mother's rivalries. He said, I don't want no parts. But Venus explains how useful he can be knowing that her son Cupid likes to stir up trouble. Because what does he like to do best? Play with people's hearts. So Venus, she basically draws out the whole plan for her son. And the plan is as follows: while Psyche sleeps at night, Cupid is supposed to pierce her heart with one of his arrows in order to fall in love with the worst human man possible. All her suitors and admirers will then be sad to be turned away and will once again worship Venus at all her altars and temples. Hmm. So Cupid listened also closely with approval and interest and agreed to the terms with only one condition. Cupid must be the one to choose the vile mortal man that Psyche will be infatuated with. So Venus agrees begrudgingly, and Cupid takes off with his wings to avenge his mother as promised. And Venus peers into Cupid's chambers at the random shrub, which is the nymph, and goes about her way. Just left sis there. She probably still scared. She didn't want no smoke with Venus. Ruthless. All right? So now we go to the next scene where Cupid swoops down into Psyche's chambers while she's asleep. He got his arrow ready, cocked back, and all that. Aim. However, as he approaches Psyche's bed, he noticeably lets the arrow go slack. Cupid finally gets to see the cause for his mother's concern. He gazed upon Psyche's beauty and made known that she was the most beautiful thing he has ever seen in his life. Aw, man, the thirst is real. He admired her beauty in each step as he inched closer and closer to capture more of her hair, face, and curvature. He began to panic as he watched her in her bed, stirring in her sleep. As she kept moving around in her bed, he jumped back in fear and accidentally pierced himself with his arrow into his thigh. My boy is clumsy. You had one job. He's fired. As he began to breathe, he noticed the air became thinner and he gasped for breath while his vision became filled with shimmer and his eyes traveled back to watch Psyche. Air then rushed back into his lungs and he gasped and heaved as he began to hold his chest, and suddenly Cupid starts pondering that he wanted nothing more than Psyche and to be with Psyche. Ooh. Cupid is now in a state of panic, understanding his newfound emotions, but never thought he would fall victim to it. He cursed and pleaded to the gods, yet stopped and stared lovingly at Psyche while further understanding she has become his ruin. So some time has passed now, couple weeks, and Cupid had kept his secret from his mother Venus of his encounter gone wrong with Psyche. He had made visits each night to his beloved Psyche, and above all, he was more afraid of never being able to see Psyche again over disappointing his mother. So the mama's boy is like, listen, I'm in love with this girl. I ain't trying to fumble. I gotta see her, even if that means I just look at her while she sleep. He's He's got to be the Roman chapter of the Creep Squad. He don't got nothing on Peter Guns or nobody from the Creep Squad of New York. I'm sorry, right? Now, I play too much. I play all day. In order to hide his newfound infatuation from Venus, the following things had to take place. Two things. One, Cupid had to hunt down each of Psyche's mortal suitors to make sure they fell in love with someone else. And two, he then went to ask a favor from Apollo, the god of sun, light, and knowledge. And as Cupid explains the situation to Apollo, Apollo then explains how Cupid made him miserable, falling in love with Daphne, only for her to turn into a laurel tree just to refuse his advances. Cupid, forced to apologize, Apollo reluctantly asked why he should bother to help him out at all. So Cupid explains because he has fallen in love with someone who competes with Venus's beauty. Apollo admits he is doomed, and Cupid pleads for further help. Now, Apollo, after careful consideration, agrees to help, only to see how this is going to play out. Because my boy done heard the story and he's invested. So, the plan is as follows. That night, the king, Psyche's dad, entered Apollo's temple and spoke to the oracle to send a message directly to Apollo for a prophecy that would help him lead to his daughter's betrothed. Apollo's mission from Cupid was to ensure Psyche would be pushed into the arms of Cupid per Apollo's prophecy delivered from said oracle. Now, confused and defeated king asked the oracle for a prophecy, to which the king is baffled and even further confused when the oracle tells him that Psyche is to become affianced to a winged beast. Okay. Apollo grew annoyed and angry through the oracle and tells the king that if Psyche evades her fate, then the kingdom will be in great ruin and it is out of his hands. He also tells the king to take Psyche to the highest mountain and in the shadows will await her betrothed and to leave her there. So Apollo over here, Apollo Lion, Apollo is Apollo Lion through the oracle to the king on behalf of Cupid to make sure that Psyche is his shorty forever. Crazy, right? So against his wishes, the king took Psyche the next night, as told by the oracle, to the mountains despite his better judgment, and left her to this alleged winged beast, according to the oracle. Psyche had managed to keep a dagger on her on the winding path in case she felt the need to fight for her freedom. And the king, once at the destination of the cliff, as per the prophecy, was inconsolable, gave his daughter one last embrace before making his way back to his kingdom without Psyche forever. Ooh, that's heavy. Could you imagine? Your dad just like, here you go. I don't know who you marrying. Allegedly is some beast, but I don't know. It's the only way you don't mess up my kingdom, so bye. Imagine? Anywho, So Psyche had waited and waited and passed through the shadows and towards the cliff as per the prophecy. An enchanted wind swept her up from the cliff and placed her into the valley below. Psyche realized in this valley was this winged serpent's lair, only it was a meadow surrounded by willows, and decided to follow the rush of water into a tree only to gaze upon a peculiar building. So, in the middle of nowhere in this meadow was a palace covered in vines and leaves, and the building was made of marble and it glistened under moonlight. And curious Psyche began to be entranced as she moved closer and closer towards the threshold of the palace. And she called out, "Hello?" Cupid then replied, "Welcome, Psyche, come." Now, I don't know about you, but for somebody to be out here saying come and ain't no lights on in this house, I'm waiting for my Uber outside. I'm not coming for what? What? She a little too curious. She's doing a lot for me. But anyway, so somehow, as nervous as she was, the voice felt familiar to her. Because he's a part of the creep squad, girl. He was probably talking to you while you were asleep. But anyway, she stepped further into the darkness despite her fear as she moved closer and closer, seeing the moonlight reflect off of the colored mosaic floors. When her voice met his, she mustered up the courage to ask what this place was, to which Cupid replied, "Your home, our home." What? She replied, "Who are you?" And he assured her, "You know who I am." "My husband?" she asked. "Yes," said Cupid, "if only you would allow me to be. But if you would like to leave, you may. However, if you would like to meet me, enter the room to your left." Hmm. Psyche thought of her old life being gazed upon for her beauty, only to feel trapped by adoring fans, and she looked at the door on the left to the chamber, and Psyche's curiosity led her to go ahead and open the door. So she went inside in almost complete darkness, reaching slightly for the dagger in her coat. Cupid assured her of how happy he was that she made the choice to stay with him and that he has awaited for this moment from the time he had first laid eyes on her. Confused Psyche, still in pitch darkness, is unsure of how Cupid knows her. Cupid admits how he has gazed upon her and thinks how he has begun to understand her. Isn't that what she always wanted? Somebody to understand her? Be careful what you ask for. Psyche scoffs and says how she has never even met him for her to understand her. Yet she asks Cupid, "How do I know your voice?" Cupid replies, "Because I've met you, Psyche." Cupid professes his love for her by what he has seen as far as her personality and how she handles her many suitors and admirers, yet he makes mention to say he sees that she feels so lonely. You see? Pause right there. This is exactly how Satan approached Eve. When she was what? When she appeared to be lonely. Boy. Now, Psyche. Psyche then asks who Cupid is and how she wishes to see his face. Cupid tells Psyche that he cannot reveal himself to her, being that it will change her feelings about him. He claims he would like to keep things pure, but suggests that there are other ways to get to know him. I bet you would like to know her in other ways, you creep. Anyway, Cupid takes her hands in the dark and gently brushes them on his face. For a brief moment, he didn't feel like an atrocity like the king or oracle had described in the prophecy of him being a beast. Psyche then felt his shoulders and gasped as she realized her betrothed has wings. Cupid confirms, asking if that is okay with Psyche, to which she is okay. Cupid then embraced her in a hug with his wings and kissed Psyche. Cupid and Psyche consummated their union, but to Psyche's dismay, she felt even worse than before. She noticed a few things, one being how he would leave at dawn and never return until the nighttime, day in and day out. Or should I say, day out and night in. In the meadow, he was able to hide Psyche in plain sight from Venus's jealous eye. And in the day, he was on Mount Olympus, and by night, he was with his wife, and no one knew except Apollo. Now, she grew restless and decided to confront Cupid by telling him one dawn to come back to bed. Cupid assured he would be back while Psyche grew tired of his antics, saying how she thought Cupid understood her old life, but all he did was transfer her to the same one, but in further isolation. Seems like that's a lot of people's circumstances. That type of abuse. But anyway, she begs to see him not for who he is, but what he is, since she still has yet to gaze upon him. So Cupid tells Psyche that if she really loves him, she won't need to look upon Cupid because he has his reasons. Boy. Psyche grew impatient, fervently expressing how she does in fact love him, whoever he is, how he identifies. Cupid then replies that that is all he needs from her and that he hopes that's enough for her as he takes off to Mount Olympus. Now, months has gone by now, and Psyche realizes she wouldn't have to worry so much about being alone much longer due to her growing belly. Psyche was elated, but then realized her circumstance. How could she be so happy to be married and now pregnant, yet she had never seen her lover for who he really is? She became fearful. Somehow, the oracle's words played back in her mind of the monstrous winged serpent she had grown to love. However, Because of her pregnancy, she gathered up her courage to seek her beloved's identity. Psyche's curiosity stirred. One night, as Cupid was sleeping, Psyche departed to retrieve the dagger she brought with her many moons ago on her journey to Cupid's meadow. Hmm. As Psyche stood over Cupid, dagger raised, she lit an oiled lamp and gazed upon her lover's face. As Psyche gasped, she saw the most beautiful creature ever known to man, a god, but not just any god. It was the god of love himself. Finally, she called her beloved by his true name. Cupid? Recognizing his blonde curls and his elaborate wings, Psyche, lowering her dagger with her shaky hands, drops her lamp. As hot oil leaked out and scorched Cupid's shoulder, he yelped in agony as he realized what had happened, staring at the oil lamp on the ground. Furious, Cupid begins to tell Psyche how he has betrayed her, despite him wanting to love her against his mother's wishes for vengeance against Psyche. Cupid tells Psyche he had risked everything to be with her. Psyche pleads for forgiveness for her ignorance, but Cupid refuses due to her lack of trust, which really would always keep her, literally and figuratively speaking, in darkness. Cupid tells Psyche that he can no longer be with her because love cannot survive without trust. Psyche then attempts to tell Cupid of their growing child. But belligerent Cupid tells Psyche that she may stay here and be taken care of by the palace servants, but she will never see Cupid ever again. Now, that was a lot to take in, but I have a few questions. And I'm going to break this into just part one, and we'll be back with part two. But for those of you who are in this live chat, or maybe you want to chime in the comments when this stream is done, do you believe Cupid was, I won't say right, but do you think Cupid was justified in the way he was acting? Do you feel that Psyche was justified in the way she was acting? And the story is nowhere near finished. We're just at the half point. But I want to talk about this because, in my opinion, it's very hard to be fully engaged with someone's mind and heart and not want to show your mind or heart. It's a very isolating feeling to feel like you're in love all by yourself. But as I stated in the top of the episode, were they in love so far? Because again, this is the half point. Were they in love or were they in infatuation? Or do you feel so far that perhaps Psyche is in love and Cupid is in infatuation, or was Cupid in love and Psyche in infatuation? Let me know, because it is one of those topics where it's very, very hard to draw a line of distinction between love and infatuation. And what is the significance in identifying the two so that you know the feelings that you're feeling, if it's real or if it's even worth fighting for? Nobody ever in life said, I'm infatuated with this person, they're worth fighting for. No, that's stupid. You're going to find another infatuation if you can. It's temporary for the most part, right? Infatuation, in my opinion, can also lead to the next hottest thing smoking. Sometimes with infatuation, things die down and you begin to become obsessed or spend time and energy into someone or something again and again and again. But when you love someone, it's a little harder to try and look elsewhere when you feel like that particular person can complete you. You don't have to look elsewhere. It serves its purpose. You have that unconditional love. You have that familial love. You have that brotherly love. You have that eroticism. There's no need for more. So think about that. And I'll be back shortly with part 2. See you later, track stars.